The Galactic Alliance, a coalition of strong extraterrestrial species, had long established itself as a dominant force in the cosmos. Recognized for their superior diplomatic maneuvering and overwhelming military strength, the Alliance wielded influence with a strong hand. For centuries, they had widened their reach, employing aggressive negotiations, economic fines, and veiled threats to bend weaker cultures to their will. Diplomacy for the Alliance was often just another weapon, a technique to subjugate without firing a shot. Their reputation was established on a fundamental truth: when the Alliance wanted something, they would receive it, one way or another. As the Alliance's reach stretched, they inevitably turned their interest toward humanity. Earth and its colonies were viewed as valuable additions to the Alliance's ever-growing domain. But rather than launching a direct assault, the Alliance opted for their traditional technique: incursion through diplomacy. At first, little seemed amiss. Benign requests for trade agreements quietly favored the Alliance. Minor territorial modifications ceded space to them, all under the pretense of mutual benefit. Human leaders, eager to avoid conflict with such a formidable coalition, often conceded to these requests, believing compromise was the path to peace. But the Alliance's expectations grew bolder with each triumph. Economic sanctions were levied against human colonies that resisted under the pretext of enforcing galactic trade regulations. Diplomatic envoys from the Alliance arrived with smiles and promises, but always with underlying threats that were impossible to ignore. Human territories were slowly being peeled away, not by force, but by the relentless pressure of diplomacy wielded like a weapon. The more humanity yielded, the more the Alliance pushed, confident in their power to bring humanity to heel without ever firing a shot. Within human society, dissatisfaction began to build. The once hopeful belief that peaceful talks would safeguard their future was fading, replaced by growing resentment and fury. Many saw the compromises of human leaders not as diplomacy, but as weakness. What had started as diplomatic negotiations had become a slow erosion of human sovereignty. Each new agreement seemed to take something away, whether it was territory, resources, or dignity. The Alliance's influence crept ever closer to Earth itself, and the public's patience was wearing thin. This mounting frustration found a voice in Alexander Cade, a rising political figure who openly challenged the status quo. Cade was unlike the cautious leaders who had come before him. He spoke bluntly about the dangers of appeasement, and the need to stand firm against the Alliance's encroachments. His rhetoric was fiery, filled with promises to safeguard humanity's interests at any cost. Where others saw diplomacy as the only option, Cade saw it as a trap, a slow descent into subjugation. To his supporters, he was the leader humanity desperately needed, someone unafraid to defend their home and their future. To his critics, he was a dangerous provocateur, risking a war humanity could not win. But as the Alliance's demands became more outrageous, Cade's message resonated with a broader audience. The idea that humanity needed to stop talking and start standing up for itself was gaining traction. As Cade's influence grew, he called for an end to concessions, warning that the Alliance's true intentions were far from peaceful. He pointed to their ever-growing encroachments as proof that diplomacy had failed, and that humanity was being led down a path of submission. Cade argued that the only way to preserve their future was to show the Alliance that humanity would not be bullied, that they were ready to fight for their place in the galaxy. The turning point came when Alexander Cade was elected president of Earth and its colonies. It was a clear mandate from a people who had grown tired of the Alliance's manipulations. His election sent a message: humanity would no longer be pushed around. Cade wasted no time. He strengthened humanity's military, invested in advanced technologies, and reinforced defenses across human space. Under his leadership, humanity was no longer waiting to see what the Alliance would demand next. He was preparing for the day when talking would no longer be enough. The stage was set for a dramatic shift in the balance of power. The Galactic Alliance, used to getting its way through diplomacy and coercion, now faced a leader who would not be intimidated. Cade's rise to power marked the beginning of a new era, one where humanity would no longer be content to play the role of a submissive junior partner in galactic affairs. Tensions were reaching a breaking point, and under Cade's leadership, humanity was ready to fight. But the Alliance, growing impatient with humanity's refusal to submit, decided it was time to force the issue. In a secret operation, they launched a surprise attack on the human colony of Arcadia, a thriving settlement known for its strategic location and rich resources. The assault was swift and brutal. Shrouded warships descended under the cover of darkness, unleashing a devastating bombardment that leveled entire cities. Tens of thousands of civilians were caught in the crossfire, wiped out in an instant. The Alliance believed that this show of force would break humanity's resolve. They expected that the sheer scale of destruction would terrify President Cade into surrender, forcing him to yield to their demands. It was a strategy that had worked countless times before. But this time, they had miscalculated. News of the massacre reached Cade within hours. The images of devastation filled him with a cold, burning fury. This was no longer about politics, no longer a battle for territory. This was an attack on humanity's very existence. For Cade, this was personal. The decision to abandon diplomacy was made in an instant. The Alliance had shown their true colors. Any chance for peace was gone. Within hours, Cade addressed the people of Earth and its colonies in a speech that would be remembered for generations. Standing before a grieving world, his voice was steady and unyielding. Enough talking. The Galactic Alliance has shown us who they truly are. They believe they can break our spirit with terror, but they are wrong. They sought war, now they will have one. We fight not just for survival, but for our honor, our dignity, and our place in this galaxy. It is time to show the Alliance, and the entire cosmos, what it means to provoke the fury of humanity. His words ignited a fire within the human race. The pain and anger of billions transformed into a singular, unshakable resolve. The days of submission were over. Factories retooled for war, recruitment centers overflowed with volunteers. Humanity, long underestimated by the Alliance, was ready to fight. Revealing its true strength under Cade's leadership, the mobilization for war was swift and decisive. The military, long forced into a defensive posture, was now prepared to strike. Advanced weapons, once hidden, were brought online. Covert intelligence operations disrupted the Alliance's command structure, and Cade's strategy was clear. This would not just be a war of defense. Humanity would take the fight to the enemy. The Galactic Alliance, confident in their power, had expected an easy victory. Instead, they had awakened a force unlike any they had ever faced. The war they had sought to impose on humanity was about to become their greatest mistake. Least prepared, Cade's strategies were as daring as they were effective. He employed misinformation and psychological warfare to sow confusion within the Alliance ranks, forcing them to misallocate their forces and resources. Decoy fleets lured the Alliance into ambushes, while human attack teams targeted vital supply lines. Abandoning entire areas of the Alliance's territory, isolated and vulnerable, Cade was not scared to take risks, and his measured gambles paid off with a sequence of early triumphs that sent shockwaves through the galaxy. One of the most significant triumphs occurred in the Battle of Vega Prime, where a human fleet, greatly outnumbered, managed to annihilate an entire Alliance armada by utilizing the gravitational anomalies of the system. Cade had anticipated the Alliance's usual tactics and used them against them, turning what should have been a decisive defeat for humanity into a shattering blow for the Coalition. This victory and others like it forced the Alliance to reassess their tactics and left them on the defensive for the first time in their history. As the war dragged on, the Alliance's original bravado was replaced by an increasing sense of fear. What they had imagined would be a quick and decisive battle was evolving into a protracted yet expensive war. The Alliance, once the dominant force in the galaxy, was now straining to keep pace with an adversary they had severely underestimated. Every battle revealed fresh layers of humanity's military capabilities, and every failure further eroded the Alliance's morale. Cade's leadership was essential in this shift. His willingness to make hard decisions, to push his efforts to the limit, and to react to the shifting dynamics of battle kept humanity on the front foot. Under his command, human forces remained relentless, refusing to give the Alliance a moment's respite. Caught off guard by the ferocity and effectiveness of the human counteroffensive, the alliance found itself fighting a conflict on numerous fronts. Stretched thin and unable to predict where the next blow would land, the balance of power in the galaxy was shifting. The coalition, once the unquestioned rulers of the stars, was suddenly facing the very real chance of defeat. The war they had started, confident in their superiority, was becoming their greatest nightmare. Humanity, guided by a determined and ruthless leader, was proving that they were not just a force to be reckoned with. Together, they were a force that could change the future of the galaxy. As the battle between humanity and the Galactic Alliance raged on, the toll it took on both sides became increasingly obvious. The early successes won under President Cade's leadership had come at a steep price. Whole fleets were lost in horrific battles. Cities, once thriving centers of life, were reduced to ashes. The casualties were staggering. Millions of lives were lost on both sides, and the conflict grew beyond what anyone had anticipated. For every inch of ground won, there was a severe cost.